Championship Sunday is just a mere hours, a couple of days away. We're gearing up for the AFC Championship game with our friends at CBS Sports. It's the Bengals and Chiefs Part 2. It's Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports, the AFC title game, and we're going to talk about it with Jason Cohen. He is VP of Remote Technical Operations for CBS Sports, coming to us from his now seemingly annual trip to the center of the country. How's Kansas City treating you, Jason? How you doing?
We've never been here before, so it's nice to see a new city and a new town and a new stadium. They've got a football team here, apparently.
I've heard.
It's good. It's good to be back in KC. This year was a little bit of an unusual situation where there was a good chance that we were going to end up in what they were deeming a neutral city in Atlanta, which had its advantages, mostly being indoors.
Sure.
But while we're certainly familiar with Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta, we're very, very familiar with the stadium here in Kansas City, and it's good to be back in comfortable grounds.
Sure. Yeah. This is the fifth straight year that the AFC Championship game has been in Arrowhead, which is wild because I'd never been in it before that, despite the history of the Chiefs. So the last 5 years, which is an NFL record, no one's ever gone or hosted a conference title game 5 years in a row. So what advantages does familiarity with a stadium offer you generally? And maybe what is it specifically about this stadium that you guys have kind of gotten cozy in the sheets with?
Right. I mean, look, I think when you take a game of this magnitude, you always start with, okay, what did we do in the year past, right? Like you have a template, obviously, for a game this size, right? And even if it's Super Bowl, you always refer to what did we do the last Super Bowl. So you start with the AFC Championship game, and it's okay, what have we done the year past, and how do we want to build upon last year's game? And when you're going to go through that process and trying to figure out how to make the show bigger, of course, it's only easier to do it when you're thinking about, well, what if we're back in KC, ... The hardest part about the process, for us and for Fox, was trying to figure out how to fit this size of a show in a stadium that you weren't sure where you were going to. Because at one point last week, just like our counterparts, we had 4 stadiums we could have ended up in. We could have ended up at one point in either Buffalo, KC, Cincinnati, or Atlanta. So the harder part is just not knowing where you're going. But once you do know, and it's a place, like you've said, we've been 5 times in a row, a lot of it is rinse and repeat. Now, it doesn't mean that it's easy because you're still trying to cram a giant show into a stadium that still has to conduct its normal business in a sold out crowd. But the AFC Championship game, especially when it's, when the Championship Sunday comes, the game that's on the late window of that Sunday is arguably the second biggest show of the year on TV, right? Like,
Right.
Outside of course, the Super Bowl, that late Championship Sunday game, whether it's AFC or NFC, usually garners, if the game is close, one of the biggest audiences on the planet. So, again, even if you're back in a stadium that like the back of your hand, you still have to treat it as if it's possibly the second biggest show on the planet.
Sure.
And you don't take anything for granted.
Yeah, no doubt. So we talked earlier, and there's a story up on Sports Video Group that was kind of previewing the postseason for you guys. You did 2 games in Buffalo, and now you've got the game here in Kansas City. And with each week, that show gets bigger. Your guys' A game in the regular season has gotten to such a point that it feels like playoff caliber week in and week out during the regular season. Then as you hit the divisional round in Buffalo, you added some tools and toys. We could talk about what was able to get used or not based on the weather that you had up there. But from that jump from last week to this week, just how big of a leap is that in terms of operations, personnel, cool, fun toys you throw on it? Is that a big jump, or are you guys just kind of, accenting here and there?
No, I think that, listen, to your point, it's a bit of an escalator ride. We do feel like today, from where we were maybe a few years ago, we almost travel with a wild card show. What we used to be our wild card levels has become essentially our weekly regular season A game. Sky Cam, Pylons, line to gains, shallow depth steady cam, which we call Atlas for those on Twitter who are wondering.
Yeah, I don't know why I forgot that.
But we feel that weeks 1 through 18 now is essentially what looks like a wild card. Now, we do step it up a little bit when we get to the wild card round and we man a few extra cameras. And then we really take a nice step come divisional. where you saw last week, we introduced the Trolley Cam. We did have the drone outside, which saved us because of some of the icing issues with fixed wing. The drone was able to kind of power through that storm and shoot some just unbelievable shots of the stadium at Highmark. And then when you get to AFC Championship, we do add more coverage cameras. We add more super slow-mo, low end zones. We add more field handhelds. But I think the biggest adjustment we make for Championship Sunday is the studio shows on the road. So, when you bring the studio show out from New York and now you've got the pregame show on the field, halftime show on the field, you bring with that, obviously, 2 additional mobile units. We have a QC truck. We have a robo truck for additional pan bars that will be on, 4800s shooting the goal lines. So now you add 4 extra units with more generator power, with obviously more crew, more management, more people on site. And I think that's what you see in the biggest difference between a divisional and a championship game for us this year.
Sure. If we could, real quickly, I'd like to reflect back on the divisional game in Buffalo, the Cincinnati Buffalo game last week. Snow games, people like viewers love them because they're very eye catching when you go by. But for you guys operationally, and take us inside the really nitty gritty, fans see the obvious things like the cool SMT graphics where you can still see the lines, the yard markers along the field through that technology. But when you get conditions that seemed bad, when they get that bad, what wheels does that set in motion for you guys in the truck and on site?
Yeah, look, first of all, I would be remiss if, I could talk about what worked or what didn't work come, last weekend during that show. But my gosh, Brandon, I gotta, give my hats off to the CBS crew who was out there working tirelessly in those conditions. And don't forget, that didn't end just when, Burrows walked off the field, right? Then you have to strike that whole compound, all of that cable that's been there for weeks and weeks, in those conditions, in the snow, in the freezing cold, so to the men and women of CBS who worked that show out in those conditions, they should be applauded because that's not an easy task. And I think we almost take for granted, that all the stuff we do, just happens. But they should be commended for working in those conditions. Yeah, look, I think it looks great on TV. It feels great on TV. Yes, there are some challenges with it, and you do lose a little bit of operational power at moments when you have stuff like that in those conditions. We had a fixed wing plane scheduled to fly above. There was icing issues at the airport. There was some power issues on the sideline at one point with some of our cameras on the near sideline. We had some issues with the trolley and the weather and some RF stuff. But listen, we muscled through, and at the end of the day, everything that we wanted to work, that we threw at the game that was scheduled to be deployed, worked, minus an airplane. And when you could say that in that type of a storm and that type of a weather, again, it just speaks to the people who are out there who are, dedicating, their livelihoods and making that stuff happen, because, it's a lot of gear and equipment and cables, and it's a lot of, effort to get all that stuff working. And so it's pretty remarkable that when we looked at the post-mortem from last week, minus a few little things here and there, that the only real major hiccup was the plane is astonishing.
Yeah, and like you said, you had other aerial views. So
yeah, the drone from Beverly Hills Aerials provided the drone, and they really saved us. And I know that it wasn't ideal flying conditions for them to power their drone, not from a safety standpoint. I was talking to the pilot, and he was not worried about the drone, going down in a storm, because the winds weren't that bad. It was just the moisture. It was the wetness from the snow, just pounding the drone. The drone would land and it would just be soaking wet. So it was more of just a technical concern of ruining the drone more than anything. But they muscled through, and hats off to them.
Yeah, incredible. And like you said, kudos to your team for plowing through, because that was a really exciting game watched by a lot of people. And there's, you appreciate the people that put in the effort, from the camera operators to the people that were really out there in the elements throughout the entirety of the game. You mentioned a couple of cool toys that were on the divisional round that will certainly be in the AFC Championship game this weekend. One of those is Trolley Cam. It's a fun one to talk about. Look, the technology is not revolutionary. It's a 2-point cabled aerial camera, but your geographic placement in the stadium is pretty unique to you guys. And it's a camera angle that you've really only used for what? Maybe this is the third postseason in the NFL. So take us inside that. What's it been like watching that grow up and become a camera angle that's almost become a bit of a staple of CBS NFL coverage?
Yeah, look, it is nice that it's become a fixture come, our divisional round and championship game, and you'll probably see it again at the Super Bowl next year. It doesn't work at every stadium.
Sure.
First of all, Trolley is just a pet name for it, but quite frankly, it's a 2-point system from FlyCam.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat Halley and company have helped us, develop a really slick, easy to operate and rig system on the far side of the field that's designed to kind of fly over that first, second row of the crowd and kind of give a unique perspective of maybe something that happens on the far side of the field and follow it down the field. Like our genesis of the idea was to follow Tyreek Hill.
Sure.
And, it was when we were looking at, wow, this guy's going to take off down the sideline. How do we keep up with him? Because the Chapman can't do it. The far card is great, but how do we
Right.
keep up with someone if they take off and they're flying as fast as he is, 22, 23 miles per hour down that far sideline? And that's kind of where the trolley came from. I think it was more of a concern of how we're going to keep up with Tyreek. And to your point, it's become a staple. But again, it wouldn't work. There are certain stadiums, if we had ended up in Atlanta, we couldn't do a trolley there just based on the rigging points and the suites and the compound, the concourse level. So, one of the silver linings when it was ruled that we're going back to Kansas City was I was able to call Pat and say, "Ooh, trolley's back."
Nice.
And yeah, to your point, look, it's not a groundbreaking, unique, revolutionary technology. It is a 2-point wired system. They've been doing it for years.
Mm-hmm.
But it gives us what we like of a different perspective of action on the far side. And, last week in Buffalo, when it wasn't working, part of that first half, I could hear the front bench being like, "Where's Trolley?" So like, it's good that it's become part of their muscle memory, that they know that it's there this time of year. And, hopefully we'll get a Jamar Chase or some kind of a Kansas City play on the far side of the field. And it'll pay its due this weekend.
Yeah, certainly. One other element I wanted to ask you about is we've been hearing a lot about this new Fujinon lens, the HZK 25 by 1000. You guys got to play with it a little bit at the end of the regular season. It kind of debuted here in the States in December. And ESPN used it at the college football championship game, I think maybe on a Monday Night Football game or two. And now you guys had it last week in Buffalo, and we'll have it again, I believe, this weekend in Kansas City. But what's it like working with that lens? What advantages does it offer, and why is that something that seems to have garnered the attention of a couple of big broadcasts over the past month or two here?
Yeah, first of all, thanks to our friends from Fuji to, continue to help push the envelope and send us this to play with. They sent us a similar lens, not the, 25 to 1000, but a similar for Final Four last year, and it looked great. We had it on the court, and so it kind of started to bake the idea. To your point, it could be used in a lot of different machinations, right? We used it on the Christmas game on the near cart as like a double stack. ESPN on the college football, I believe, used it at a high end zone on a 4800 to kind of help that camera up top. We were looking at that, and ultimately where we landed was we put it last weekend on an additional low end zone on a Sony F5500. So we can't overcrank it. You're not going to go in super slow motion. And last week through another fly in the ointment when it started to snow.
Sure.
And it was like, how's this going to work? But what I'll say is it was astonishing. I actually watched it the whole game on a separate feed, and it was beautiful. It really captured some amazing shots. And I think the director started to, in the second half, get more comfortable with it. And I'm optimistic that it's going to play a bigger role even this Sunday in Kansas City. The key that we found from the Christmas game to what we did last weekend was we tried to jam it down the director's throat on the near cart as a coverage camera. But, oh, by the way, it shoots shallow depth of field and so on. And he was trying to use it in his normal capacity, but it doesn't work that way where you try to make it do other functions other than what it could really be used for. So it was trying to follow the quarterback, but QB moves too fast at times to kind of keep up with the lens, and how you have to kind of keep working the focus. So we took that philosophy away, and what we did was we just added it. We didn't replace anything. We added it to last weekend's show in Buffalo. It was an added low end zone. So, last week the director had 2 low end zones plus this one. This weekend I'll have 4 super slow motion low end zones plus this one. And it becomes a color camera, right? Like I think years ago they called it the Weasel. Basically now it could either get good shots for him at moments when, the QB's got good separation from the huddle and he's kind of standing off of the other teammates and he's got some good depth, or you could give it to our edit EVS operator who can incorporate it into packages for rollouts, bumpers, teases and those types of elements. So we've kind of changed our philosophy, and I think we'll get more bang for our buck out of it now that we've turned it into what it could really be, which is more of a color cam.
Nice. Very, very cool. All right, Jason, we really appreciate you sharing some insights on what this postseason's been like, and we're looking forward to the AFC Championship game, of course. Real quickly, before we let you go, since Fox has the Super Bowl, this is your season finale, but like you said, this is a huge, huge, huge broadcast. But when you look back at the season of the NFL on CBS, production-wise, any big games, any moments, anything that you guys caught along the way, what are some highlights for you as you reflect back on the season that was?
Yeah, I mean, look, to your point, this is our big one, and we all take a big, deep breath when this one's over on Sunday. Our friends from Fox still, of course, have one more in 2 weeks, but for us, this is the one where we toast on Sunday night to celebrate, to your point, 4 or 5 months of 100+ games on the air where you have to hold your breath and keep power on all of them. It's a long season, right? And the season only gets longer every year. It feels like, as they add regular season games and stuff to it. But look, Brandon, I think it's important. I could pick individual games or individual moments, but the reality is the number one incredible thing about working at CBS Sports is obviously, and it's the people, right? And it's the people that we work with. Obviously, the vendors and the tech crew in the field are just unbelievable. And then just our division, led by Patty Power, and then all of our colleagues, Mike Francis and his engineering team, Craig Stevens, Evelyn Jackson, Jeff Millett and Tom McShane and Chrissy Florian, and then, and Scott Davis and Alyssa Blake and George Dumatheris and my team, Adam Satter, Shane Conlon and Jenna McKeon, just the people that you do it with on a daily basis, and you kind of help bring the season to life and then move the machine forward every single week is what it's all about. It's less about which games did, unbelievable ratings to us, or which had the great fourth quarter finish where all of our cameras were used and we added super slow-mos or sky cams or drones or whatever. It's just about being with that work family, right? Which is what it is, right? You spend so much time in the trenches with people that you trust and you need and you support, and it's just a family you develop. And that's the part that I think is my favorite part at the end of the season, before we all splinter off and race to golf and basketball and then March Madness and start planning next year's Super Bowl. It's that moment when the show's done on Sunday and you kind of give those people around you big hugs, and it wasn't just oh my God, everything worked this day. It was that everyone has that mutual feeling of, we did it. Right. Another season done together. And it's that togetherness, seriously, that I think is the highlight of the season.
All right. He is Jason Cohen. He's the Vice President of Remote Technical Operations for CBS Sports. The AFC Championship game is this Sunday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. The Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs duke it out again. Jason, really appreciate you stopping by to kind of share what this experience has been like for you and your team. Wish y'all nothing but the best on Sunday. Have a great broadcast.
All right. Thank you so much, Brandon. And make sure everyone watches on Sunday. Let us know what you guys think on Twitter. We'll be watching.
I will be. All right. Thanks a lot, Jason.